Peculiarity in the public ministry of Jesus was his open conflict with the authorities of his time, particularly the scribes and the Pharisees. No? Murag kontrabida permi si Kristo sa iyang public ministry. And our gospel for today is an example when he was asked why his disciples did not observe the traditional fasting, unlike the disciples of John the Baptist and the disciples of the Pharisees. Jesus came into the world with new ideas and new teachings, and he wanted to share and to teach that new ideas and new teachings to people. Unfortunately, Christ knew that the people whom he will encounter, he will encounter had their minds fixed on the old concept of life. Their minds were fixed on the old concept of learning and understanding. When the K-12 system of education was introduced, many students, parents, and even teachers were so against it. In the same way, when the new liturgical responses for the Mass was introduced through the new sacramentary, there were also many who were against it, for they say that the old one is better. The tension in our gospel for today is actually between Jesus, the modernist, and the Pharisees, who were considered as the traditionalists. And because of this tension, Jesus presented to us in our gospel the parable of the new and old cloak and the new wineskin and the old wine. In the gospel, Jesus said, "No one tears a piece from a new garment and sews it into an old garment." No? Kabalo man ta nga when a new cloak is wet, no, it causes to shrink, no? Kung itahi ni siya into the old cloak, no, the tears will become worse because the old garment has no elasticity. No? It has no elasticity. So in the same way, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law during the time of Christ, they had no elasticity to accept new teaching. And so they refused to accept the teaching of Christ. No? When Jesus taught them the Sermon on the Mount, and he said, "Blessed are the poor, those who mourn, the hungry, the thirsty, the persecuted," they failed to understand it. And when Jesus taught that they must have to pray their enemy and forgive their persecutors, they thought it was an absurdity, it was a nonsense, because their understanding has no elasticity at all. During the time of Jesus, wines were stored not in a bottle, no? Kaya wala pa may butilya sa una, but rather they were stored into wineskins, no? Wineskins is actually an animal skin formed in order to contain liquid. We also know that when a wine is stored, it undergoes a process of fermentation that the gas would cause pressure into the container. So in other words, a new wine must have to be poured into a new wineskin and not into the old one, because the old wineskin has no elasticity when the fermentation causes gas or pressure. So the message is very much the same, that we should not be afraid to accept new teaching. No? Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, was loved not only by the Catholics, but by also other religious denominations because of his new approaches, no? New approaches in the administering of the church. My brothers and sisters, let us try to ask ourselves, do we consider ourselves the new cloth and the new wineskin? Do we accept the teaching of Christ and put it into practice? Or are we like the Pharisees, whose hearts and minds confined in an old ways of life? Please all rise.